Good afternoon, everyone. It is a beautiful June day. Hoping that's beautiful wherever you are. And I'm here with an amazing and inspiring woman who has helped me so many times with all kinds of challenges. Wynn, welcome. We met at this beautiful mastermind about a year and a half ago where there were about 20 entrepreneurial women who were just all incredible in their own right, all different industries, but all had the same purpose of wanting something from their lives. And I'll let you introduce yourself because you've been doing incredible things. And tell us what Win is about and what you have been doing this past year and a half.
Certainly. Thank you so much, first off, Diana, for even letting me come and share this time with you. I'm so excited about just being here with you. And yes, crossing paths in the mastermind was amazing because I have been watching you for 18 months and just being energized and uplifted myself by just being in your presence. So to be with you today live, I'm like, whoa, it's so exciting. I will warn you that mom says I am my favorite subject, so I'll keep it really short on the intro. um, I have founded what is called the I'm Possible lifestyle. And what I do is I help women in particular who are purpose driven, who really feel called to something in their life to take it from what feels kind of impossible and we just change that with an apostrophe of space into the words I'm possible. And so my journey kind of with this has been it started off as you're talking about just inspiring and motivating people to do things that they didn't think they could do. And that was really fun. And then it sort of morphed. You know what happens when you get into business and you're doing it, and you start to hear back from people you work with. And what I started noticing was that when people stepped into their possibilities, income was following that. And so I really started looking at, okay, wow, not only are people feeling great and they're motivated and inspired to really live their purpose, but money's following this. So it got really focused on and looked at seriously, how does that happen? And so now the I'm Possible lifestyle is really about helping purpose driven women to create wealth in their life. It just naturally sort of evolved as that. So that's what I do.
That's absolutely
and
incredible.
group
And
programs.
there's so much truth to that, to the fact that as soon as you realize, whether you're male or female, that you are enough and that you're worth it, and nothing in this life is perfect, but you just go for it,
Mhm.
things change and they all of a sudden
Yeah.
start manifesting, and they happen so much quicker than you ever realized. I mean, I, at that um, retreat where we met, I sat in front of these 20 women and I said, I've been having the visions in the shower of being a fashion designer.
Yeah.
And I said it out to the world, right? To these 20 women at
Mhm.
at the start. And then 5 months later, it happened for me. And I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about this. It was just a matter of, I want to do this. I'm not going to step back, and this is going to happen. And it's just
Mhm.
so beautiful when you
Yeah.
treat yourself as somebody who is number one, who is
Mhm.
not last on the totem pole, which I think has been the biggest challenge this past year. There's so many women that are friends of mine and relatives and everyone I talk to that's saying, I'm drowning. I have so much on my to-do list. I
Yes.
don't have enough hours in the day,
Mhm.
and I don't know how I'm going to get to it all because things have changed, right? This past year, we've been all thrown for a loop.
Yeah.
Obviously, health issues, but also kids at home and work being unrelentless for those of us who kept on working, thankfully.
Yes.
And how do you juggle? How do you then make yourself a priority? It's just tough,
Yeah,
really tough.
you remind me of one of my gals who I've worked with. She actually started a nonprofit. And I want to go back to what you were saying about speaking it out, that you wanted to have the fashion line and you spoke that out in front of us. This gal that's worked with me, she tells people all the time, she's like, be careful what Wynn makes you say. She said she will wait you out and she will keep questioning you until you admit what it is you really, really want. She said, and then after that, all bets are off, man. She said it's like you just have to go and it just starts happening. And even within the pandemic, in what she wanted to do with the nonprofit, even inside of that, we actually found this amazing open door. She really wanted her nonprofit name. Like she could visualize herself on top of a globe, on top of the world, with sort of her flag stick on the world and where everybody would know about this nonprofit. And sure enough, as much self-sabotaging as she wanted to do, even inside of the pandemic, it's like happening. And she's, we just keep working on it and bringing it forward in a calm, focused, simple way. But she's like, oh my gosh, everything I said out loud is actually coming true, and that's the most fun of the whole thing is to watch people go from what they don't believe is possible and then it happens, so it's really fun. And in the kind of the balancing act that you were asking about, for me, I find, and I'm a Libra, which is interesting because that's the scales of balance, right?
Yeah.
But I have to sort of suspend that because to me it's really about being in harmony or flow. And I learned this from TD Jakes, and one of the times I was at a conference with him, and he said never rob, we think of this as robbing items in our life. He said, never rob the same thing twice. So, in the midst of him trying to do his TV and his preaching and his family, and he had another business and all these crazy things, he said, I never, like, if today my family doesn't get my attention, tomorrow they have to get my attention because I can't keep them from my attention 2 days in a row. And I've always thought that was kind of interesting because there are some days when you just really need to be hunkered down and working or focused, or you're in the flow of your business, then you don't want to break that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be in that consistently forever and not have self-care and taking care of children and being with your spouse or significant other. So for me, it's like I can't necessarily keep everything balanced because anytime the wind blows, whoop, now you're out of balance. Whoop, now you're out of balance. But I like to think of it more as being in harmony with what the flow is and using kind of the law of rhythm to just be in that. Family, today is going to be really heavy work day, but tomorrow we're going to, and then be fully present for them. That's a big thing too. I've, switched with the pandemic from working in person and in an office. I brought all that home and have been working from the living room, which, now my child is home and he's not a child, he's in college, but still, he bops in and he's like, hey, mom, I want you to watch or we should do. And I'm like, okay, stop the flow, listen to him, and same thing with the hubs, So you gotta, I think flow more so than balance works for me. Yeah.
And knowing what you need, right, on any given day. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there are two things that popped up for me. Number
Uh-huh.
one is that question, what do you really want? And I think there are very few of us who are courageous enough to ask ourselves that question and not just ask it once, but go deeper. Kind of like that woman was telling you,
Yeah.
that you're forcing them to ask themselves that question again and again and
Mhm.
again. And every time
Yeah.
you do, I'm sure it goes really, really inward for
Oh,
them,
yes.
right?
Oh, yes.
And I know it happened to me every time I ask myself, what do I really want? And I start writing it down or outlining it and then asking again, is that truly what you want? Or is that what others want you
Mhm.
to do? And that goes
Yes.
deeper, right? And then is this something that my ego wants me to do? Or is that something that is a true, deep purpose that I have in life and I want to have happen, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then I think, we can't not talk about the pandemic and the changes and the transition that we're now all facing. But I think a huge silver lining for a lot of people was that they were thinking about purpose and why are we put onto
Mhm.
this earth and what are we meant to do with our lives. And I'm seeing now that things are slowly coming back to normal, that we're starting to forget a little bit that we had that
Mhm.
period of inner growth. And I really don't want to lose that. But I know it's been a really, really tough year for you personally.
Mhm.
And if you're okay with that, can you touch a little bit about on what has it been like? I know there's been a lot of family trauma and
Mhm.
changes, and
Mhm.
how did you overcome that? How did you go through that? How did you come out on the other side and go as far as you want to go? It's entirely up to you.
Sure, sure. Well, um, yeah, the pandemic had those extra sort of components for us. And it's interesting when I think about us as a family facing death. Um, then I also have to remember that even though the death that we faced was not pandemic related, people still went through the normals of life, and part of the normal of life is death. And then many families lost lots of family members because of the pandemic. So on March 13th of 2020, I lost my oldest brother to a rare lung disease. He had a double lung transplant, and then there was rejection and other complicating factors. And so he died on the 13th. And I think it was the 17th when we shut down as a country. So it was a really crazy dynamic in there because I'm from the South. Death means lots of people come to your home, they bring tons of food, and you are days worth of, mourning and being with people and sharing, and then that sort of progresses and goes into a celebration of life, which then turns, into more of the memories and the beauty of the person's life and that kind of thing. But in a pandemic, when your country's just shut down, none of those things happen. So there was a period of trying to really navigate that death. Like, what does this mean? And I think, it's taken a long time, and it was taking a long time, but some of those thought processes, like you're talking about, when you have to kind of ask yourself, what is the purpose of life? What do I really believe happens after death? That kind of calls into question your spiritual part of who you are. Um, and so there's a lot of questioning, that self-questioning that goes on there, and then learning to mourn alone. I mean, my husband was here, we spent the pandemic together, and he felt it as well, but each person has their own journey, and I think that's super important to remember, that everyone is so unique. And even going back to asking that question of what do you want, just like what you said, Diana, it's not what do I think other people want for me. It's not what should I want because it will make my family better. It's really and truly about what do you want. And that journey through the grieving process is that too. How am I going to allow this to impact my life? And in the case of my brother who passed, he had made a worldwide impact on a lot of people. His job caused him to interact with people from all over the world. So that we heard from a lot of people around the world, and we knew that we would, and we did. Then in January of 2021, on the 5th of January, I'm one of five, and I lost my middle brother. So he was killed. He is a distance cyclist. So he was on his first 100-mile ride of the new year on January 1st, and he was actually struck by a car. And that subsequently, he died of that 4 days later. In that situation, again, um, we were coming out of total lockdown, in January. We were kind of getting things back together, but not all vaccinations had been done and, all that kind of stuff. It was still sort of locked down. And him being in the hospital for the 4 days, only two people were allowed to see him. That was his son and my sister. And it was a really difficult time then to have to use technology like this. But I have such gratitude for the makers of technology, because we we were able to have FaceTime and communicate and Zoom calls and things like that when we couldn't be in the room. But that was a whole nother aspect of how do you learn to deal with this. And this brother was kind of quiet. He's kept to himself a lot, and like I say, he was a cyclist. So, all those hours on the cycle being with by himself, a lot of thinking going on, but, it was alone time for him. He didn't ride in a group. And then amazingly to us, the outpouring again of the impact that he made was worldwide. And I just thought to myself, how is it that my quiet, not the guy who bursts into the room and takes over anything, with energy or whatever, how did he impact all of these people from, I mean, literally all over the world? And it just so a couple of things I take from that is everybody does have purpose and everybody does have their way of making impact. And it's not always the keynote speaker at the conference. Very often it's the woman or man you sat next to who just gave you just a few words, but they were so infused with wisdom and knowledge. And so that person has impact and the speaker has impact. It just, for me, coming out of COVID, and then we got COVID. My husband and I both got it in January. That was, weeks upon weeks of feeling terrible. And then months after that, we kind of long hauled for a while. So, I mean, there was just a lot of things. The thing is, I could have really backed down and just been like, woe is me, and poor our family. And now we've been sick and, everything's gone to hell in a handbasket, But that's not what it's about. I mean, we're here on earth with a purpose to serve, to impact others' lives, and each thing that happens, we get to, this is the beautiful thing, choice. We get to make our own meaning out of everything that happens. And the whole situation behind, my brother who got hit by the car and the court case and just that whole experience was, I went into that, prayed up, meditated up, really looking for God to show up on that day and to guide me and to tell me what is my role in this court appearance, as a supporter. Do I need to speak? Do I not need to speak? It ended up that I needed to say a little something. But, so those were all choices I made to be able to show up in that situation and to show up today, even with you, having gone through losing two family members, having COVID, pandemic, and everybody has their own level of trauma. Aging parent on my side, aging parent on my husband's side, It's totally choice. Do you let that overcome you and overwhelm you and you roll up in your ball? Or, do you look? For me, that's a look to heaven. Do you pray? Do you meditate? Do you call in your spirit guides? Do you reach out for the unseen help that is still here for you?
And for actual help, right?
Do what? Say again. I'm sorry.
And for actual help, do you acknowledge and honestly say to people who care about you but might not know how to participate and how to express their care, do you say, I need help? I think those, whenever I did that, were some of the most embarrassing and vulnerable moments to
Mhm.
ask for help because we're so not used to it.
Mhm.
And to be so surprised, just like you were saying, at the outpour of support
Mhm.
because people are wanting to help. They're
Yes.
wanting to help others. They are just
Mhm.
not aware of how to do it and how to ask in a proper
Yeah.
way. And that is just,
It's on both sides. You need help. You don't know how to express what you need. They want to help. They don't know how to do it because they're not hearing from you what you need.
yeah,
It's like, gosh, if we could all just have the courage to be vulnerable, ask for what we need, and people are so happy to do that. I mean, nothing makes like me feel better than to be able to help someone else, right?
just like you were saying, I think it's so powerful to compare your two brothers and the fact that they had completely different personalities. And yet, it's because they had those completely different and unique personalities that they impacted people, were each made completely unique. And that is how we impact people, not by being cookie cutter in terms of approaches and following the path that somebody else maybe designated for us. It's about being who we truly are. And through that, through being courageous about being who we truly are,
Yeah.
making an impact. So
And that
balance,
is,
you mentioned balance, and I can't even imagine what you must have been going through with
mhm,
everything.
mhm,
How how did you manage to stay in balance? You have a business, you have your family, and all the anxiety that we all had. I just read reports about, which I think are actually lowballing it, but saying that anxiety levels in general went up 30% and they went up 50% in women this past year. How did you balance
mhm.
it all?
Yeah. So again, I I lean more into flow and being in harmony. So when I needed to say time out on working the business, I took that time to grieve, um, and really stepped away a bit. So I think for me, recognizing what I need and being willing to admit that I need it was a big deal. It's easier to see
That's
in other
huge. It's
people.
huge for all of us to
Yeah,
recognize that we need a break, right?
yeah. It's easier to see that in other people, but it's hard to see it for yourself. You can give anybody advice, right? But taking it yourself is a whole different thing. So seeing, hey, when you know what, you really need time. And I scheduled time on my calendars. Like as a tip, I guess it would be I was like, okay, from here until here, nothing. I'm gonna do what I want to do. I enjoy doing puzzles, like jigsaw puzzles. It allows my mind to do this while I'm focusing on this, And I needed some of that. I just needed some processing time. And I think traditionally that would have been time spent in, I don't want to say meaningless, but casual conversation. Um, in the natural grieving process in the South, when people would come to visit, you engage in these conversations that later you don't remember. Okay. So
Mhm.
what I kind of put in place of that was doing the jigsaw puzzles because it was allowing my mind to process the death while being active doing something, because very often it's what's going on in your mind when you're not conscious of it is what is needed to be going on in your mind. Now sometimes that works for you, sometimes it works against you, but in the grieving process I scheduled out time. That was kind of one thing. And then I consciously, I picked up like 3 different puzzles and I just did them one after the other, and I allowed myself. That's another big part of it, is when I was doing the puzzling, I knew that that was part of my healing process, So I wasn't doing it feeling guilt that I wasn't working on the business. And I was able to do it without that guilt because I had scheduled that. And then asking from my husband, sometimes because we were the only two here, at that time, I said to him, I need to share something with you, but I don't need response because he's a fixer. If there's something wrong, he wants to jump in and help you fix that. And I was like, I don't need fixing. I just need sharing. And so really going back to your point about asking for what you need, that was a big thing, and being able to ask that of him, and then again, like I said, I have to give the kudos to people whose gift and whose purpose was to create this technology for us. Because without this ability to see each other, this is how I saw my brother. Like I said, I'm one of five, so my other two siblings, this is how we saw each other. This is how we supported each other, was through Zoom calls, and through this was our face to face for 17 months. Um, and two critical times in our life. Um, yeah, did that answer what you asked me? How did I come through?
Yeah, yeah, no, and it's interesting because I did the same thing. For years, I would say to myself and to others that art is healing and that you should be doing it twice or three times a week at least because it is just so transformational and it's so re-energizing and reinvigorating. And then I wouldn't drink my own Kool-Aid. I would I would go in twice a week and then other things would be more of a priority. So
Mhm.
and then just kind of let it go. And then this year I put it in my calendar every day. Every day at this particular time, you have a painting session scheduled and you have no excuse. Nothing takes precedence over this. And I can't even say what an incredible change this has been in my mindset, in my overall well being, in my relationships with my family and kids and parents. Absolutely life changing because just like you're saying, you're so engrossed in this activity that is out of the day to day norm
Mhm.
that your mind is able to process on a subconscious level in a completely different way and deal with. And obviously I did not have such incredible tragedies happen to me this year, but being with three kids in a house for 16 months, uh,
Mhm.
having to juggle the fact that there are no signups for school and then just everything, three different
Yeah.
businesses, and the question that everybody asks me all the time is, how do you do it all? How do you do it all with with
Mhm.
three kids and three businesses? How do you find time for this? And that's my answer. I make sure that I do this every day, and it's huge. So I know we're coming close to the end,
Oh
but
gosh.
you've got so much going on. Tell us, what are you working on? How can people find you? Like I said, you've been an inspiration for me on our weekly calls. We still all touch base and check in with each other on the weekly basis. And I have an aha moment every time you and I chat, and I'm so, so grateful for that. Um, but tell us what do you have in the works?
Yeah.
What's
So
going
the big thing, the big exciting piece for me is, right now I am in. I've got the doors open for 10 women who want to serve and who have been serving actually from their highest level purpose. Like they know they're doing their purpose work, but their income is not caught up to it. And so right now I've opened the door for 10 women to come and work with me using what I call the I'm Possible Discovery System. And in there, I give a paradigm, some mindset things, what I call the inner game of business. that mindset piece, right? And I teach you a way to
Which is 95% of our
over
success
limiting
is our
beliefs.
mindset. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so a lot of it is in the mindset. That's inner game, but we also address the outer game. How do we keep you in your highest level purpose? What are the strategic things you need to do on focus? Because purpose driven women, we're like, whoa, we can do everything. We get so into our purpose and we get into our passion and our mission, and then it gets clouded. So we like simplify all that down. That's our outer game practical. But what really is like the secret sauce or the thing that really makes what I do work for women is we add in what's called the higher game. And when we bring in the higher game, that's the spiritual piece. So it's kind of like a triangle or the Trinity, right? It's three pieces that all need equal attention. So it's the mindset piece, the practical piece, and the spiritual piece. And we bring those things together to build momentum toward your first 100K year. And the way that I do this in discovery, when we bring those three things together, we work for 6 weeks and we bring in 10K. Just like that's what we do. Time and time again, it works. We bring in that 10K because when women get that 10K and it eases some of the burden and it proves to them that they can work in their highest level purpose and not feel guilty about money coming in, I teach them about that. Then it's like momentum city and they're off to the races to actually bust through that 6-figure ceiling. So that's the big news is right now only 10 women come into working with me for 6 weeks in the I'm Possible Discovery System. We build that trinity for them and call in, like you stay with me till we bank that 10K, baby. Usually happens in 6 weeks, but you're going to stay till we bank it. And then, then you're off to the next level and next steps of things. So that's, and how they get me. So right here on Facebook, because this is, we're live on Facebook here. So I'm Wynn Archibald Godbold right here on Facebook. A DM, you can just drop me a DM if you want to know something about the Discovery Program. Is it for you? That sort of thing. We can just talk over Messenger a little bit. And just you can just say Diana info. Then I'll know where you came from and I'll know what you're asking about. So yeah, that's the big stuff right now. So in 6 weeks, it's like, okay, you want to serve at your highest level and create wealth? Let me help you do that.
That's amazing. That sounds so
First come,
wonderful.
first serve.
So, yeah, if you want to add anything into the comments in terms of how to get in touch with you, we can do that.
Yeah,
But
I'll drop my email address in there.
yeah, that would be great. Yeah. But thank you so much for being here and for sharing from the heart and for going so deep. I think there are very few people who are courageous enough to talk about grieving and living through and really doing that in a passionate and personal and heartfelt way. So I'm very grateful to have had you here today. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I feel like if we can't be open and lay it out there, we're really not, doesn't do us any good to hide from other people, right? Vulnerability is a good thing. And maybe
Yeah, vulnerability per Brene Brown, who I have been
yes,
a huge fan of,
love
um,
her.
is the birthplace of creativity, of innovation, of connection,
Yeah,
and it only pays to be vulnerable and authentic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you
thank
for
you.
having me here, Diana. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. Thanks.